So I'm pleased to be able to moderate this panel today. Our discussion is going to center around the notion of conversational UI, and really, we have an agenda. We all discussed it in advance, and what we'd like to do is to make sure that everybody here understands that one of the key core issues that we're faced with is what the platforms will allow us to do. So we're going to discuss this from the perspective of people who are building bots, and we have two folks up here who've probably built more bots collectively than maybe everybody else in the world. And then we have two folks who come to it from the specifics of what brand builders need from deploying bots. So I'd like everybody to introduce themselves. We'll go around the panel, and then we'll begin our discussion. So let's start with Lauren. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren. In case you missed my talk, I work at Pandorabots, which is probably the oldest and largest chatbot hosting platform in the world. About 245,000 developers have built 300,000 chatbots, which have chatted more than 3 billion times with end users. So we have a lot of data. We know what people tend to say to chatbots in conversation, what works and what doesn't. And it's really exciting to be in the space, or have entered around the time that Robert did, and now see all the new toys that we have to play with, the new audience. So yeah, I look forward to diving into new best practices and some older lessons learned as well.
Thanks. Dmitrii?
Hi, my name is Dmitrii. I'm the CEO of Chatfuel, a visual and intuitive platform to build bots that have both conversational elements and UI in it. Since our launch a year ago, we have more than 230,000 chatbots created on our platform. And we build bots for brands like Uber, National Geographic, Forbes, TechCrunch, NBA, NFL. So since then, we got a lot of knowledge of what works and what not in the bots world. So I'm really excited to share it with you and share the best practices that we've learned so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Dmitrii. Anne-Sophie?
Yes, so my name is Anne-Sophie. I work as a VP product for Booking Experience, which is part of Booking.com. And today I think it's really interesting for us to be able to discuss what we launched recently, which is Booking Messages. And that's basically a chat interface using bots. And that's going to be interesting to discuss with everyone here.
Scott?
I'm Scott Jones. I run user experience design for Expedia, which, like seemingly everybody else here, is a travel technology company. And we've been experimenting with the different pieces that you'll hear, conversational commerce, customer service, some partner relationships with our airline and lodging partners, and how do we connect that dot with the consumers on the other side. So very interested in having the conversation about what good looks like in this new world.
Excellent. So let's start with a question to the room. How many people in this room are working with brands and want to deploy, or are in the process of deploying, or have deployed a bot of some kind, by show of hands? So fair, I would say, what, 20% of the folks. And who here are actually bot developers in the room? So most of you really are neither bot developers nor brands, so just interested third parties. So what I'd like to ask as a first panel question is, how difficult is it today to build and deploy a conversational bot? Lauren, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Dmitrii and I were just joking about this earlier today, that on his platform it takes 5 minutes, and on our platform it takes 5 years. That may be an exaggeration, but there are definitely a lot of great no-code authoring tools like Chatfuel that can get something up and running very quickly. I think we saw 2 of those examples with the Pizza Hut bot and Whole Foods, where you're just choosing suggested responses. Pandorabots is designed specifically to expose code. We actually support an open standard scripting language for building chatbots. And it takes a lot longer, and it's for brands and developers who actually want to build out that free-form conversational flow. But I think the biggest thing with a bot is that you don't know how people are going to interact with it until you actually unleash it into the wild. So rather than planning to focus on upfront development, you really need to consider that it's an iterative process, and you'll invest in refinement over time.
And Dmitrii, you allow people to build their own bots, sort of a do-it-yourself bot factory. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Sure. So our focus is to enable any non-technical person to be able to build a bot. This is actually how we started with Uber, because they didn't have development resources, and they reached out. Their digital department team reached out, and they were like, "Oh my God, we can do it on our own." So they did it. And then when they gave it to their users and they saw the magic, they started to invest more resources, and they started to add more functionality depending on their needs. For example, they wanted to collect feedback, so they added the plugin that allows them to collect feedback. Or they wanted to have conversational part, so they also added it on our platform. And they started to input, to design conversations they expect their users to have. So for us, we started with focusing on free-form text as well, and free-form conversations. But we see more and more people actually benefiting from experiencing UI elements within chat interface. That's why we realized it's very important to give also this option. And that's why we want, again, non-technical person to be able to combine both in a single chatbot and be able to deploy it very fast to prove to their management and to prove to themselves that bots work and they actually deliver value for the users.
It's interesting. Anne-Sophie, where do you see the line being drawn in the interface between where a conversational bot has to hand off to some of the more sophisticated graphical user interface elements like buttons and browsing in your particular application, which is travel and handling the customer journey?
Yeah. So just a little bit of background on the chatbot we launched at Booking.com. So the booking messages we have, it's basically to enable the conversation between a hotel and a traveler. Right now, it's quite difficult to interact if you speak different languages and you cannot really understand. If you have a question saying, I want to check in late, do you really speak English? I want a parking spot. Let's say you fly from the US to China. It could be hard. It could be hard to understand each other. So that was really the first thing that made us launch our chatbot, to really have that kind of understanding between the travelers and the hotels and making the travel experience really easy for the customer. So now, right now, the platform is really completely integrated in our web, app, MDOT, everything. And it's really about having the right conversation with the customers, but it's not going too far into the whole design and emojis and all that. It's really keeping it simple, keeping it in the same framework as the Booking.com website or app, and making it really simple and interactive to have the best experience for the user. That's really how we see it.
Scott, is this something that you feel that you have to do in-house, or is it something that you can really go outsource for? How tightly does it have to be integrated into yours and also your partner services?
Well, I think that because so much about travel is, there's expert knowledge, and we've been doing this for 20 years. You've got to understand how to solve that problem, and that all comes from subject matter expertise. But I think finding, we want to be anywhere the consumers are. And so that's embracing the platforms, that's embracing, innovations around, natural language processing and these other pieces. But ultimately, that, our value is that we've watched travelers for decades, and we understand the patterns, we understand the uses. And so now how do we trigger that? How do we make that happen? So it has to be done with part of it in-house.
Do we feel as a group, if I polled the group, would you say that natural language processing and natural language understanding is really a solved problem at this point? Now it's a question of how to deploy it and where to deploy it, or are there still a lot of things that need to be solved in order to really understand what the customer is asking? Dmitrii, what do you think?
There is a long way ahead of us, for sure. Very exciting way. We see that NLP and NLU are helping a lot, but sometimes it is easier to present the most straightforward path or expected input from user right away, so that there is less opportunities to go off the path, and to actually found for a user to find themselves in a stuck situation in a bot.
So how important would you say that personality and humor and the kinds of things that we all have together when we speak is important from the perspective of building a bot? Lauren, what do you think?
Clearly, I think it's hugely important just based on the type of engagement that we've seen. Utility bots can be kind of boring. Like, it's great if they're useful, but you definitely want to take the opportunity to personalize the interaction with your end users and build something that they can bond to. On the NLU side, I think it's definitely not a solved problem. That's why you're seeing brands launching with buttons and menus and suggested responses, which are, at this point, in some cases, a necessary stopgap to launching things quickly, but could be crippling because they're a somewhat phone tree-like experience. On the flip side, if you can do something with a button like booking an Uber, that's so much easier than having a long conversation about it. So there's definitely a place for buttons and media in the design if it's a better user experience.
And to what extent do you feel at the actual companies who are promoting services that personality is an important aspect, and wit and humor and those things that we have in our normal conversations are important in your brand discussions with your end users?
So right now, what I would say, it's only the beginning. We are really starting to experience what it looks like to have a real interaction with our customers. But at Booking.com, we collect a huge amount of data. So right now, we're at a stage where we try to understand what are the most common requests, what are the travelers want when they travel in destination, what they want really to experience. And that's how we start building our interface. So right now, we are far away from adding interactions and emotions and all that in the conversation.
So limited
That's
chat,
what I feel.
more utility.
Exactly.
And you both, Scott, you feel it as well?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that at some point, because conversation is so natural, it seems highly usable, but it's still kind of an illusion. And if something can't be reliable, especially when it comes to booking a trip, it's so many unknowns. I know a lot of the examples here, there's these great examples of people knowing exactly the neighborhood, the price, the star rating, the pet friendly. That's not how travel works. People don't know what they want. They don't know what's possible. And so I think we have to hand off and make sure that we're building that confidence, that trust. And so, yes, I think personality has its place, but all it takes is one fail. And just like real life, a badly stated joke can kind of ruin and erode that trust.
We've been there for that. So which of the platforms is providing you all with the best support? I know that many of you have deployed on a bunch of the different platforms. Dmitrii, whom do you think is giving you the best platform support in terms of providing you an interface that you can work with your bots?
Chatfuel is available on Telegram and Facebook, and we are in close collaboration with both of them. And I must admit, both of them are great, and Facebook is moving in a very good pace. They carefully listen to our feedback, and they recently updated their platform with a bunch of new features. So it feels like they're implementing it, and at a pace which is pretty great for such a big company.
Lauren, what do you think?
So we provide open source integrations for every platform that you can put a chatbot on, every messaging environment. And sometimes the community hacks their way onto platforms that aren't even open yet. And what we see is just that there are challenges with staying cross-platform in terms of brands who want to launch. So it's great, the trend that all the platforms are opening up, but as each platform develops quickly, it's getting harder and harder to keep up in terms of making things cross-platform available.
So do the brands want to be outside of their brands, or are they comfortable with their customer experience happening through interfaces like Facebook and Telegraph and Line and Skype? What do you think, Anne?
So right now we have our homegrown platform. We don't integrate with Facebook Messenger or other platforms, but there's a reason why. So behind that, it's really because we need the interactions between hotels and travelers. And right now, Facebook Messenger is not able to integrate third party. So it's going to be a new feature, that's for sure, in the future, and we'll see how it works. It would be more for us to see the relationship from a customer service perspective. But if we really want to keep the relationship between the travelers and the hotels, we need our own homegrown platform. That's my view on it.
Scott, you too?
Well, I think we're already sort of dealing with this in the mobile existence. There's Google with material design, there's iOS. Everybody's trying to put their fingerprint on what the experience is. You've got to go where the people are and find that mix between what is your brand, why do people identify with you, but then fit the experience that they're looking for. So I think as with much that happens with the evolution of interface, some of the more edge pieces will fall out and the best practices will come in, and conversation will probably look like conversation everywhere because it's conversation. And then if you're tapping into common interfaces like web views and other pieces, you can reuse those elements and kind of hold on to your brand identity.
Do you feel like as customer service agent bots, there's an opportunity to upset the client because of areas where they don't understand the natural language? Is that a risk for us?
I think it's absolutely. I think it was alluded to previously. Even with scripted, IVR type relationships, people go off script. People are going to want to talk about what they're going to want to talk about, sometimes in incredibly verbose ways, which is shocking. Considering the have to type it. You've got to be prepared for that. I think there's always going to be an ability to understand not just context and tone, but when is the bot in over its head, and you've got to really take care of something with a human being.
And how much of that can be solved, Dmitrii, with machine learning?
Well, quite a good bunch, I believe. But there's a quote that I like a lot. It says, 90% of machine learning is hypothesis, right? So you basically have to establish a very good feedback loop right away. So you throw hypothesis, and then you teach whether it was right or wrong. So if this feedback loop is established, then there's like very good chance and solid chance that certain use cases can be solved. And we already see them being solved with XAI and a bunch of other companies automating different things. For example, Digital Genius is another company that revolutionizing the support through AI. And this is exactly what they do, right? So the hypothesis, and then human confirms that it's right. And the more data we have, the better it becomes. So eventually, I think we're going to go very far. And right now is the good time. Since we have the data, we can collect it, and we can run it through feedback loops and basically make very good use out of it.
Lauren, what proportion of language in, let's say, English, do we have the ability to really understand now as maybe a percentage to help everybody get a sense of where we're at?
Ooh, I don't want to speculate on that.
Does anybody want to speculate on that? What proportion do we think that Siri understands when we add to it the audio to text portion? I heard earlier people talking about maybe 80%, which I don't personally think is enough. I'd be frustrated if people only understood 80%.
Anything less than 99.9 or 100 is not enough.
I don't think I understand 99.9% of what people tell me, but
I don't understand what my kids type now, and so the constant evolution of the language, I think is going to make it I have no doubt we're going to get better, but you've seen the progression of language with just in the short period that chat has become such a phenomenon.
Oh, that brings up a very interesting point. So you think that chat represents its own unique vernacular and that it's a language into itself and of itself. Like my 11-year-old daughter, I don't understand anything that she texts to me because I don't understand either the emojis or the acronyms.
Yes, I'm not sure they understand what they're sending either.
No, they understand.
They get it, right? So are there ways to deal with that particular problem? Because what I'm hearing is that different generations have different types of methods of employing chat. And it sounds like you might have to actually develop natural language understanding, one for each generation. Would you say that's true, Lauren?
Yes, definitely. We've actually done that in practice with certain brands. We built a bot that, based on users' vocabulary, it was a game bot. It could infer how old they are and what level of the game they should be playing. We've also built bots for audiences where there are big differences in dialect and how you speak based on a geographic region. So from the end user perspective, it's just one bot, but it's actually 25 bots adjusting based on what you're saying.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add to it. We have a Sacramento Kings NBA team bot, and what they did, they actually adopted it for different audiences. So you can ask it, hey, what's the latest score, of the latest game, or you can send it a basketball emoji, and it will, respond to it. So this is, again, the feedback loops are super important. When you have a bot, you have to carefully see what users ask and then adopt based on like how different user groups communicate with your bot.
So at Booking.com, are you taking the conversations that people typically have with agents and archiving them and then using them to learn from as part of your process?
So that's exactly what we're doing, actually. So we take the most common requests, either by phone or by emails, everything, and we try to understand what they are. And from that, we have templates, specific templates, and we translate them. And that's why we have like all the requests translated in 42 languages, and we start building on that. And that's really how we build our chat interface.
And is there a point, Scott, at which you feel that you have to jump off and escalate from the bot to human interaction? And is that automatic at this point?
It's not automatic in the experiments we're doing right now, but I think it's very clear as you look at the language that we're capturing and understanding just the wide variety of what people are looking for and what they're wanting to understand. And it's not just a customer service perspective. Even in, I often say that, I've wanted for years to get rid of the basic form on every travel search site to be able to get rid of that. But when you start looking at what the open text adds and what it brings into, we've always been good at kind of handling the basics, what, when, where, but why is that kind of magic holy grail, the true digitization of kind of an online travel agent who has that ability to kind of prod and kind of decipher sort of those nuances that don't come out just from clicking boxes and entering text fields.
Lauren, can you solve the problem of why for everybody with a bot? Why you're traveling to this location? Is machine
Eventually,
language? Yeah.
I think you will. We've talked about machine learning and challenges there and building robust bots and personalizing based on dialects. That's definitely where the future is going. I think it is bots are a unique opportunity to get to that why. Why are you going there, and what can I do to help you when you're there that's really unique to you? I think that's the value proposition at the end of the day.
So maybe the big question I have is, should we be trying to make the bot feel like a person, Dmitrii, or should we make the bot feel like a bot?
That's a great question, and I think you faced it 14 years ago, right?
Yeah, we went there.
You've been there. So you understand how important it is to be transparent, because again, we cannot be 100% accurate right now, and the moment it fails,
That's right.
Right, the moment it fails, the magic ruins, and the user experience is just broken. So it's actually a good way for us as a bot developers and bot makers to escape this fail scenario, to be honest upfront and say, hey, I'm a bot, I'm just a bot, I'm still learning. But I'm getting better and better every day, and then one day I'll be able to answer any of your questions. But at the moment, hey, I do not understand you.
Yeah, as a fundamental principle, you should never try to trick your users into thinking that the bot is human. I completely agree, bots should be upfront about their status. But because you are having conversation, and that's a fundamental human thing, people will treat the bot as if it's human-like, and that's what they expect to get back in conversation. So while the bot shouldn't try to pretend that it's human, it should be human-like. Because that's just the nature of conversation.
And does that make it more difficult for the brands if they're talking with a bot and they expect a human-like response? Is that harder to do?
I think that shows you where the bar is. I mean, most user interface has been designed to give you the roadmap of where you're going. Conversation doesn't have that roadmap, and as soon as you fail, like we said, the magic is gone, which means you have to be very careful in how you respond. I mean, how many of us have had conversations with humans that don't go exactly right, or sent emails that aren't understood correctly, and now you're dealing this with your business in a real-time conversation. It's a lot to be aware of.
Well, in life, we don't have the Command Z button that we'd
That's
all
right.
like. Would have helped me a lot as a young guy. So the next question I have is really about what we're going to do about the interface itself, where there are certain portions of it. Let's talk about the transaction. Is the bot capable of handling the full transaction, including taking the money and the credit card? And this seems to be a very important aspect of what an agent might do certainly in the travel business. Anne-Sophie, is the bot up to doing that job yet? Trustworthy enough?
So we're not there yet, that's for sure. But that's the view we have on the business. So by launching, for example, booking experience, we want to integrate the whole travel experience inside that kind of chat interface, not only providing insights on how you get somewhere, but what you can do when you're in destination. And then when you start providing information on, for example, you can go to that museum or to that attraction, then you also want to provide the full experience, end-to-end travel experience, which means allowing the customer to purchase his tickets, to have a QR code working everywhere in the app and all that. So yes, I think we'll need to get there. We're not there yet, that's for sure.
Scott, how much of this is driven, do you think, by the meteoric move to mobile?
I mean, absolutely, it's driven by the ability to have these kind of micro moments, these micro conversations, these ability to do things. Sort of, it's really the promise of what the internet was threatening 20 years ago. Sort of the stream of consciousness. I want this now. I want to do this. So I think mobile has a lot to do with it. And as we proved over time, people will do anything on a phone if it's easy enough and they have enough confidence in it. The same could probably be said for conversation, if it can be easy enough, if it's really the right solution. But because of these microservices and these abilities to interact, I think it's been talked about a lot here, handing off to other services at any time, I mean, we're already doing that. In fact, that's how we're solving it on the Facebook Messenger app right now, is we just hand back off to the traditional web experience and take care of it. So over time, that trust will happen as long as the trust is really, really there.
Dmitrii, you said over 250,000 bots already deployed. Can you tell us or share with us and with the audience how many of those or how much of that is happening in mobile versus, let's say, a desktop or a web-bound experience? Do you have that statistical data at your fingertips now that I've asked it?
We don't have it, and we don't have it because there is no difference from the platform's point of view. So there is no way for us to figure whether it's going from the mobile or desktop. But it feels like the mobile is dominating.
Well, your bots only live on Messenger and Telegram, right?
Yeah.
So the breakdown is therefore just how many people are using Messenger and Telegram mobile versus desktop to talk to a bot.
And Lauren, can you help provide some more insight to that? You're across how many different platforms?
All of them, everywhere you can put a bot. People find really creative places to put a bot. I have a very interesting infographic on the history of deployments. It used to be only web, a lot of Second Life, then a lot of mobile applications, Android, iOS featured bots. We started to see a lot of connected home hubs that were coming up on Kickstarter that were using our platform to power sort of the software brain and personality. We've had people build talking teddy bears. Twitch TV is huge. Which we weren't expecting. People like to put a bot on their channel to insult their friends while their friends watch them play video games. That's a thing. That's a big business, apparently. And now messaging platforms, but also these devices. So I think devices, hardware, robots are really the future, but messaging is obviously the biggest wave right now, and that's where everyone wants to be because, like we said, you want to go where your users are, and you want to make the experience seamless for them.
So one of the things that I find myself doing often is sending emojis. And I'm wondering, from a natural language perspective, is emoji an emergent form of language, Dmitrii? Do you read emojis?
Yeah, of course. So basically, if you create a bot on our platform, you can design any conversation. So you kind of enter expected input from your users. And a lot of bots, they use emojis as like trigger points to do certain things a lot.
Are you finding the same thing?
Yes, people will definitely send bots emojis, pictures of things that the bot didn't want to see, and neither did the human. So we've actually, this is another cross-platform pain point because emojis are different on different platforms. Skype has its own set of emojis, which mean different things than the Facebook emojis. And on Facebook, you can send a bunch of different stickers and a like sign. And people probably send thumbs up to your bots on Facebook too. And then the bot's like, okay, you liked that, great. How does the bot respond? Or we get a smiley face and we send a winky face like, uh-oh, she's flirting, and now the user's gonna say something inappropriate. So yes, it is a whole vernacular, and it's very much inherent to the way that people communicate today in messaging.
And Sophie, do you feel that we're going to have emojis as part of the commerce conversation during the customer journey?
Maybe. just maybe. Right now we just use really templates, so we don't really allow emojis, but who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe
I
it
wanna
will
be
come
able
inside the conversation.
to text like a pina colada and a beach ball and a sombrero, and then I want you to tell
that
me
could
where
happen.
I'm
That
going.
could happen.
Or maybe the other way, do you send images now through your messaging platform, Scott, or do you hand that off to an HTML platform?
Well, I mean, I think it's what we want it to be, especially in something like, I think what conversation's so good at is kind of that search piece. But when it comes to making evaluations, especially in travel, it is about browse. So we have to be able to send that rich media to the user to evaluate. And you saw a lot of the examples of people in that same space doing that. All you have to do is look at how are people using the platform today, and that's probably how the bots and the conversations need to happen, because people are doing what people do. That's how communication works.
So I see our time is winding down, I think. Or is that what that means?
I think that means we're over by
that means we
15
went
seconds.
over.
We went over. So thank you very, very much. And I really appreciate all of the insight from the panel. For me, it's been really helpful to learn, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.